Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kakis, and today I'm going to be joined by Amin Ibrahim, Senior Director of Value and Solutions at Hootsuite. The topic of today's episode is leveling up the demo. Amin is a major contributor to the PreSales Collective. He's actually part of our PreSales Leadership Collective Council as well. So we've had many conversations on PreSales related topics, and there is one thing that Amin is so passionate about, and it is the demo. Amin loves books, and the two of us were talking about demos as it relates to Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand book. And so today's episode is a combination of the two. How do we approach demos differently? How do we elevate the experience? How do we make sure we're getting those emotional hooks with the people that we're presenting to, and we don't seem like we're presenting the same product that our competitors are presenting? And so in today's episode, Amin is going to talk about his philosophy as it relates to demos. We're going to relate it back to Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand book, and also talk about some of the buying and selling trends that are happening in today's modern selling environment. Enjoy.
It shouldn't take weeks to create a custom demo. You've got a deal on the line, and momentum is everything. DemoStack lets you spin up a tailored demo environment in minutes, so you can showcase your product in the best light on every call. It's as close as it gets to the real thing, but now you can edit content with a point and click to craft a story that resonates. No code needed. This means less time on admin and more time impacting deals. Make the live demo count with DemoStack. Learn more at demostack.com.
Amin, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, James. Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. You know, my favorite thing about the podcast is that I talk to so many pre-sales professionals like yourself. You're obviously a PSLC member. We have talked dozens of times, and now we're essentially just having the same conversation, but recording it for everyone to listen. So it makes it kind of fun, right?
Yep. Always great chats with James.
I appreciate it. Always good chats with Amin. So before we get into today's episode, we were talking about this ahead of time at Hootsuite. You guys are doing a ton of hiring on the sales side, also doing some SE hiring, but you're changing your entire go-to-market motion. How has that been in this remote first environment?
So far it's great. We are hiring a ton of people. If you want to come work with me at Hootsuite, please do. Amazing place. Love it. Been there almost 8 years now. So I have to get that plug in there. But yeah, in this remote working environment, it's been fascinating, right? Because we've had to change the way that we do business. We've had to change the tools that we use. We have to change the processes. It's fun because we're building something new and we're making it better. So having a blast.
That's great to hear. I mean, as we talk about getting it better, we're going to talk about the demo and today's topic of leveling up the demo, which I know is a topic you're extremely passionate about. I'm really looking forward to diving into that. But before that, I want to understand your pre-sales career journey. What got you to where you are today?
It's fascinating because coming out of university, I had no idea what pre-sales was. And frankly, I fell into it a bit. So when I went to school way back in the day, I studied marketing and international business. And at the time, I thought I would go into advertising. I thought advertising was going to be my thing. And it's fascinating because you can actually see so many parallels between advertising and pre-sales. And what ended up happening is I ended up joining this great software company at the time that did customer experience management. So surveys, market research, all that great stuff. And I started on the customer success side. So I was a business analyst, project manager, client manager. And then I remember the VP of sales one day came up to me and said, "Hey, we're going to do our first solutions architect role here at this company. And we feel like you'd be great at it. You know the product really well. You love talking to customers. You love telling stories. Why don't you give it a try?" And so I looked into it. I tried it, man. I loved it. Like, this is the career for me. I love being involved in sales. I don't necessarily like all the motions that happen within sales. So as my friend and boss, Colin Fenn, likes to say, we get to be in the best part of the movie, right? If you're in pre-sales, it's all the car chase scenes, it's all the exciting scenes, and that's a great place to be.
That's probably the movie. That is good. So let's get into today's topic. And before we actually started recording, we started talking about this formula as it exists to demos. So, Amin, explain the premise of breaking the formula as it relates to demos.
So if we think about demos right now, it's almost like people have figured out in their minds, this is the optimal way to do a demo. And we could see it a lot in the vast majority of demos that we see it a lot in demo competitions. The ones that win are typically the ones that follow this formula. There's always some kind of element of like day in the life. Let's try to do something that's a little bit like zany or bring in an insight. Let's always make sure that everything's structured in terms of problem, solution, maybe ideally value at the end. And these are always kind of put together in this way. And they end up being good, but they also end up being fairly similar. So regardless of which company is doing the demo, what the software is, you could see that they're following the same motions. Now, I think there's an opportunity for us to flip that on its head and do some really creative stuff to make our products stand out even more. Because if everybody's demoing the same way, everybody's following that formula, everything just blends.
That's interesting because especially if the products are very similar, what is going to actually make you stand out in that sales process? And in my opinion, probably it's the lack of friction with the salesperson or building trust or social proof, whatever it might be. So, I mean, I have so many questions. And for today's episode, this topic of leveling up the demo came because both you and I were talking about a book by Donald Miller. The full title is Building a Story Brand, Clarifying Your Message So Customers Will Listen. It's funny because you said that you want to be in advertising. And I was like, oh, this book actually really relates to your previous experience. So what is this book all about and how does it apply to today's podcast episode?
I love this book. I strongly recommend everybody reads it, frankly. It's a book all about brand marketing and making your story very, very simple so that people understand it. It goes into a lot about how to tell a good story and how to do a great hero's journey. And one of the things I really love about the book, and one thing that became very clear to me in the pre-sales world is, in general, as solutions consultants or solutions engineers or whatever we want to call ourselves, we're highly logical people. We tend to think in terms of, here's the problem, here's the solution. We don't spend enough time investing in like the real emotional hooks for people. What really matters to that individual, the person that we're selling to, what is going through their head? What are they afraid of? What are they excited about? Why do they buy this? Are they an Apple person or are they a Samsung person? Why are they one of those two? And I think there's a great opportunity for us to really, really embrace that. If we can add that to a lot of the great logic stuff that we do, it'll be amazing. I mean, I can't remember that like the number of times I've seen like a recorded demo somewhere or some software demo from a vendor pitching to us. And it's literally like, hey, we've got all these great analytics. And it's important because analytics. And they can't really tell me, like, obviously analytics are good, so you need to buy this. But nobody can actually tell me what this is going to mean to me in my day-to-day, how it's going to make my life easier, how it's going to, reduce any worries I have in the back of my head. Or we seem to stop at that point because we think it's so obvious that everybody should get it. There's an opportunity for us to do more of that.
I really like that perspective and I appreciate that perspective because early in my career, David Warren, who I worked with at Showpad, and he ran our business development team, would say, James, figure out how these people get paid and how they get home a little bit earlier every night. And it gave me a really good perspective into how I approached demos and solutions consulting, knowing at the end of the day, like, how is this going to make this person's life easier? How are we going to help them hit their bonus? What are the ways that are going to make their lives be that much better? And actually, in building a story brand, Donald Miller says that there's 3 levels of problems. There's internal problems, external problems, and philosophical problems. And I thought that was really interesting in terms of how you pitch and you position your product during that demo as it relates to those levels of problems. And so, as you were kind of getting into this earlier, maybe it's good to level set on like, what is your philosophy around demoing?
I mean, for me, the demo shows our buyers how they can be the hero. It's got to be simple. It's got to have real language. It has to be fun. And I definitely believe that less is more. It's got to be creative. There's a great masterclass out there on advertising with Jeff Goodby and Rich Silverstein. They're the guys who did Got Milk, BMW's driving machines, just really powerful stuff that we can bring into our demos and make that more fun and more emotional for people.
Interesting. As you kind of mentioned in one of your first questions around doing something different as it relates to the demo, what are some of those examples of getting creative and getting outside of the norm? And how does it relate to this concept of heroes and villains and standing out in a process that might be extremely similar company to company to company?
When it comes to being creative, it can be uncomfortable for people to step outside of that formula, right? Like we can create a lot of these frameworks and we do the training sessions on them. It's a lot easier to just go through that typical formula because that's the safe thing to do. One of my coworkers in the UK by the name of Nish, great guy, he took one of these great storytelling workshops that we did and turned it into a pitch it was for a nonprofit that is all about donating hair for cancer patients. And he did the entire pitch through the lens of the line. It was called like Little Princess Trust or something like that. And the entire pitch was through the lens of the Lion King. Here's the villain, and you've got the, Mufasa and all that other stuff. And so we made the problems and the product and all that other stuff through that lens. And so you had your hero, which would be the people that we were talking to. We had your villains, which are the things they're trying to overcome, personified by the villains from Lion King. And you had your guide, again, which would be us following the story brand formula. And then finally, like a great outcome. And that resonated real well with them. Like they were laughing, all that other stuff. Now, would you do this with a company that's, stiffer and like way more professional and other stuff? Probably not. Or maybe you would. I don't know. But like sometimes you might want to take a step out of the limb. So when we think about demo philosophy and all that other stuff, we got to take more risks. And we've got to be really flexible in how we demo. And we've got to be willing to change on a dime based on what people think are important. Because we get enamored with our talk tracks.
Yeah, I'm reflecting back on my career right now. So why do you think that we, as a profession, are so inflexible, so to say, when it comes to changing up our demo, right? We've been taught that there's a certain style and leaders emphasize that there's a certain style and you have to do A, B, C, and D. But to your point, like, how do you actually stand out when everything seems similar? Obviously, change is hard. Do you think that there's an inherent reason as to why we just kind of march down the same path all the time?
Yeah. The big reason I think is like a lot of it is it comes down to leadership and training philosophy. There's a lot of people who first join the company and what they will teach them is this is the right way to do a demo. This is the formula. Follow this formula. Once you get better, you can divert from it, all that other stuff. But few people actually do divert from it. I remember talking to one of my former colleagues and I asked him, hey, I'm curious, why do you always start in this part of the platform? And he's like, oh, that's how I saw it the first time. And it's just stuck with him, right? And so if we want to get around that, I think that leadership philosophy and that enablement philosophy needs to change, where it's got to start off with a lot more high level philosophical, like this is the purpose of a demo. This is what you want to get out of it. These are the things you can do. Here are some frameworks you can use to tell great stories, but always remember every customer is different and align it to that. Going back to the advertising world, demos are custom advertisements for the people that we're talking to. And we got to keep that in mind and be flexible with it.
That's such an interesting point to me because I think about the curse of knowledge. Ed Jaffe wrote an article on PreSales Collective about curse of knowledge. And it's true. I know like early in my days, I didn't like a certain aspect of the product, so I didn't demo it effectively. I kind of just skipped through it because it was like, hey, this is my talk track. I could do demos in my sleep. I didn't even have to look at the product and I knew exactly where to navigate, where to go. But most of the time, the people that are seeing your product are seeing it for the first time, right? You've done it 1,000 times. They've done it first. And we lose sight of that a lot. It's got me thinking about this concept that is in Donald Miller's book around emotional hooks. How do you, as a leader, incorporate emotional hooks within your team and within your team's demo philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, we make emotional hooks like a big part of it. One of the things I actually like to encourage people in the team to do is, even as part of the discovery process, ask questions to try to understand who the customer is. I'm curious, when you buy technology, what do you look for in your personal life? Are you more of an Apple person or an Android person? I want to know where people fall on that spectrum because that helps us relate to the emotional hooks that they care about. Is it really important for them to have something that is really streamlined and easy to use and fun? Or is it really important for them to have something that's highly customizable and flexible? Knowing those kinds of things might change the way that I would tell a story, might change the way that I position what it is I want to position, because most products have elements of both. We're very inward focused in general as a profession, right? Like you said, the curse of knowledge. We know our platform like the back of our hand, and a lot of times we drink the Kool-Aid and we think that everybody should naturally get it. But sometimes we miss opportunities to make it easier for them to understand that.
I agree. It's funny because you brought up this Apple Android thing to me, I think like 6 months or a year ago, and it has really resonated with me. You had told me like, I want to know what device these people use because then I can understand how to cater my message. With PreSales Collective, we continue to talk a lot about the B2C consumer behaviors altering B2B. Large scale enterprise companies are not going to change. Like the motion is not going to change overnight, but the people that buy your software are the same people that use Netflix and they use Amazon and they use all these other companies. At the end of the day, that is going to alter the way that they view and buy technologies in their day-to-day job. It doesn't mean it's going to change the entire process because Gartner and Forrester say there's, upwards like 6 to 10 people involved in a buying cycle. So that's not entirely going to change things. The way people in their personal life are buying software or interacting with software will change the way that they approach that situation at work. And I firmly believe that. And as you talked about, use the word discovery. In my career, where I had frustration, right, is where SDR did a disco to qualify. The AE came in and did a disco to understand budget. And then the SE was going to come in to do a demo, but I never got to do my own disco. So it's like I'm kind of flying blind based on notes. But at the same time, you want to make sure that there's a frictionless process. And so disco and demo, they will always go together, whether they're on the same call or not. What is your philosophy around discovery as it relates to doing this demo that is just transformational and different from what else is out there?
Everything we've talked about in the demo philosophy, right? It's got to be fun. It's got to be exciting. It's got to have emotional hooks, all that. If you're not on a discovery, all that goes out the window. It's impossible to have a demo with strong emotional hooks if you have no idea who it is you're talking to because you've never really spoken to them. It's really hard for you to come in and be a trusted advisor for these people if you've never spoken to them. You can go through your pitch. You can answer any questions that they have. You might even have a great story laid out. But it's going to be very hard to get that to really align with what it is that drives them because you don't know them. And so you're kind of throwing darts and hoping they land.
As it relates to my comment previously about buying processes, I was just talking to somebody last week about their company, and they're looking into utilizing a tool to help with demo and scaling. But their process is like 5 calls before the SE gets on. They're struggling to get the technical disco to make sure that that demo is relatable. So you as a leader, how do you manage that internal go-to-market process? How do you ensure that you're getting the discovery notes that you need to create a good demo without it creating too much friction within that process where somebody literally clicked the demo to get information, say it was inbound, and they didn't end up getting that demo for 2 to 3 weeks and they've had 5 calls? Where's the balance in that?
It's a fantastic question because it is the major problem that we face these days, right? How do we make sure that what we offer is tailored and punchy and has a great experience, but also at the same time, keep the sales process moving quickly? If I'm looking to buy software, I would much rather have a decent demo sooner than an amazing demo that I have to wait 3 weeks for. The 3 weeks thing, like that kills deals. That's a huge problem. And so there are ways to make sure that we could still have great demos without strong discoveries. And with that, you really need to build flexibility into the team. You really need to make sure that people can pivot on a dime and change up what it is they're showing based on what's happening. And the demo becomes almost a bit of a disco demo. So in a perfect world, every demo has a disco before it. Everything's really well tailored, all that other stuff. We don't live in a perfect world. It's going to be a spectrum. There's going to be some deals where you're going to want to make sure that you build that into because it's crucial. And there's going to be other deals that need to move really fast that you're going to be comfortable with rolling with the punches a little bit more on the call. And you've got to build that into your training for your teams. Like if somebody is only comfortable with something that is completely crafted to the nth degree, they're going to struggle in that type of situation. So you've got to do both.
It's a fascinating point. And I've actually brought up my own notes from reading StoryBrand. And I mean, this is maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago at this point, about when I read the book. And I have a quote here that says, customers are looking for a guide. We need to be a valuable resource that helps them improve. That is still tried and true. I mean, that still exists today. There's a couple things in here around empathy and authority and trust. I feel like I'm bringing this up every conversation I'm having now. It's like LinkedIn State of Sales Report 2021 talks about trust and talks about essentially how people buy from companies and people that they trust, but they are not trusting salespeople right now. And it's causing, again, friction in this process. And you brought up this term of disco demo. And again, some of the most debated topics I've ever had are around the concept of disco demo. So like for you as a leader, how do you enable your team to know the product, to create a good experience, be flexible enough, and do that somewhat disco demo on the fly? Because that is really hard to do no matter how long you've been in this profession.
It is really hard to do. And so in order to get people knowing the product well enough and to be able to do it on the fly, it's useful to have a good framework for how that happens. There's another fantastic book called Weekend Language. And within this book, it's got the best elevator pitch I've ever seen. It's so simple. It's literally, here's your headline, your so what, who cares, 3 proof points, and a conclusion. Fantastic demo pitch. So what we did is we created what we call the layer cake framework. And so what we do, imagine this, it's elevator pitches within elevator pitches, kind of like Inception. So you get people comfortable with here's your high level elevator pitch, what the company does, right? This is why you need this software. Great headline. So what, who cares? 3 proof points and a conclusion. And then for each area of the demo, you blow out that elevator pitch into another elevator pitch. And in some situations, you might want to blow that out into another one. And so once you get people comfortable with this, they start at the top level and they can go deep and come high up and become really flexible with it. It's almost like, imagine like people have flashcards, and each flashcard is like a different part of the platform, and it could lead to another flashcard, or it could go back and lead to another one again. And so when you get people really comfortable with this, they can really start to roll with the punches with regards to a call. Because you come in, you know what your high level story is, but then you also have a well laid out framework for the areas you need to go deep on and the areas you don't, and tailor it to what the customer thinks is important. And then you're off to the races.
That's choose your own adventure if I've ever heard it.
It's choose your own adventure wrapped in strong conclusions and so what, who cares, and insights and all that other fun stuff, which makes it a lot of fun.
I like that a lot. And actually, to bring up something that you wrote for the PreSales Collective, you did an article on the pyramid of pre-sales and did this pyramid, which I'm going to just break down, is that there was 4 layers, right? On the bottom was passion for problems. We seek out problems. Masters of how. We know how to solve them. Translate, which I think is really important here. We translate complex to simple. And inspire. We inspire change. And so I know that you're big into the frameworks, and I know that you're big into the foundation. And so I think about how you have created your pyramid of pre-sales mixed with this, what I'm calling kind of choose your own adventure in a box per se, for how pre-sales folks, I mean, that's really powerful. So tactically, what are some ways that you build this philosophy within your team to allow this to scale? Because that's really hard.
Enablement. If you've got to make it a priority, you've got to set time aside to get the team together and work on these things. Group enablement, workshops, group demo reviews, always great to highlight what's awesome, what's working really well. And there also needs to be a clear message that there's no one size fits all. Like I truly believe this is an art. So fun fact, everybody who joins the team, one of the first things that I show them is a clip on YouTube of Snoop Dogg making fun of modern rappers. I don't know about y'all out there. I'm not a big fan of modern rap. I think it all sounds the same. And Snoop Dogg, he talks about how today, a lot of it sounds so similar. In the past, rappers sounded very different from one another, very different styles. Now, in general, there's a winning formula that everybody kind of follows. And there we go. So one of the first things that people see is they see this clip, and Snoop Dogg, in his true Snoop Dogg fashion, says, "Who can be you but you?" And that's one thing that we always try to instill in all our SCs. This is part science, part art. And everybody can have their own unique style and do things in their own way and be successful.
Oh, man. I mean, you just nailed that. I love that. I love that you show people Snoop Dogg and get into that rap reference, because it's pretty cool as well. Personally, this is where I've struggled the most of that art and science. Is how much science do you teach these people, and how much art do you allow them to go and do their own thing? And I think that is where, I continue to evolve my thinking. And I like your perspective there a lot, because it applies to sales and it applies to pre-sales and pretty much the entire go-to-market motion.
Yeah, and it's a great question. At the end of the day, if you hire great people that you trust and you give them the right enablement, you can pretty much give them carte blanche on the art and trust that they're going to get that right. You also got to give them the science and all that stuff behind it. And you also got to tailor it to different customers. Some customers need more science. Some customers need more art. So no hard and fast rules. In the same way, we got to be flexible with demos. I think we got to be flexible with how we treat our people. Some people are going to need more of a structure. They work really well in terms of structure. And some people need more freedom, and they work really well where there is no set plan and they can do whatever they want. And so we got to tailor that to the individuals on our team.
I like that. I mean, man, this has been such a fun conversation. I have so many questions I continue to want to ask you around this, but we got to close with an advice question. We've talked a lot about trends happening now, tactical, philosophical, relating back to this awesome book by Donald Miller. But as we're kind of transitioning from this virtual only world to this in-person / hybrid world and creating a differentiated experience, what advice do you have for companies who are really struggling to ensure that the demo is closing the gap for their customers?
On this, I think it's actually really useful to take a step back and ask some simple questions. Is my demo fun? Do I pay attention when others demo, or does my phone come out? Do the people we're talking to know within the first 90 seconds what the platform is going to do for them? If the answer to any of these questions is no, it might be worth taking a step back and starting from scratch, because attention spans are shorter than ever. And if we don't get people hooked right at the beginning, we're going to lose them.
I love it. Amin, such a great conversation. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate all that you do for the pre-sales profession. Appreciate you being part of the Leadership Collective, and looking forward to discussing this again at another Pre-Sales Collective event.
Thanks so much for having me, James. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Cheers.
All right, Pre-Sales Collective, regardless of how long you've been in the profession, what level you are in the profession, demos are an important part of our day-to-day and go-to-market strategies. And Amin brings a lot of opinions around the demo, especially as it relates to the curse of knowledge. I mean, what he has mentioned is that we typically do the same demo over and over again, and our competitors are doing the same demo over and over again. So what is that experience for the buyer? What is going to allow our companies to stand out? And some of the things that we talked about were the hero's journey, the villain journey, the level of problems as aligned in Donald Miller's Building a Story brand book. It's so interesting to take a different perspective and approach to the demo. How can we continue to be flexible in our demos and our presentations and make sure that we're putting the customer and the prospect at the center of what we do? This isn't a presentation about us, it's a presentation about them. So how do we guide them and be a value resource that allows them to fix an internal problem, an external problem, or a philosophical problem? For pre-sales professionals, we need to be different. We need to stand out. We need to be flexible. We need to make sure that we're doing discovery to allow our demo at the end of the day to resonate with that buyer, so that they will feel, wow, this product is going to make my life so much easier. I need to move forward with it. Amin provided some great examples around advertising and brand marketing, and even understanding if our buyers are using an Android and Apple. What do they value in their personal preferences, and how does it relate to buying software? And his advice for everyone was to take a step back. Whether you're an individual contributor or a leader, you're an executive, take a step back and understand, is my demo fun? Do people pay attention? Do they know my value prop within the first 90 seconds? Demos are an important part of pre-sales, the go-to-market motion. This role is becoming way more than just demos, but they will always have some sort of role within the buying process. I would like to know what you think about this topic. Where are we right? Where are we maybe wrong? How is your opinion different? Please reach out to me in the Pre-Sales Collective Slack. Let's continue the conversation. All right, Pre-Sales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I will see you next week.